Hello guys, welcome to Just Women in Africa. Welcome to the show. My name is Olaleko Amusa. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to leave a like. Do not forget to leave a comment under every show. Today we're talking about mental health in women in Africa. And in my own opinion, you don't need to be on the streets in tattered clothes to know that you have a mental problem. Everybody has some sort of mental problem. Am I right?
I won't say everybody has, but everyone at some point in their lives will have a mental health challenge, yes.
Okay. So today on the show we have a professional. Her name is called what's her name?
Petrina Adusei.
Okay. And she's a trained psychologist. And she's been in practice for over 6 years in the US and in Ghana. And today she's going to be enlightening us about mental health of women in Africa. Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So can you start us by telling us about yourself?
That question. I'm a mental health advocate. I am dedicated to empowering people to find inner strength, to heal from past wounds, and to be able to go on to help other people. As you said, I'm a trained psychologist, and I run my own practice, and I engage in campaigns that spread mental health awareness across Africa.
Okay, that's nice. So we hear a lot about mental health. Can you opinion, what can you say is mental health?
Mental health is basically health. Mental health is basically health of the mind, right? So as long as you have a mind, as long as you have a brain, mental health pertains to you. Just the same way physical health. You know, we say health to mean physical health. As long as you have a body, physical health pertains to you, right? So mental health is health of the mind.
Okay. So in your opinion, can you say anybody has a healthy mind in terms of mental health?
Can I say anybody has a healthy mind?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that. Is it possible for a person to have a healthy mind?
Yes.
Absolutely, it is.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so I mean, you've been practicing for the last 6 years or so. What can you say about the mental state of women in Africa?
Wow. I can't speak to the mental health state of every woman in Africa, but largely from what I know from my research, from conversations with colleagues, and from my own practice, there's a lot of work to be done. First of all, because we don't even understand the value or the importance of mental health, it affects Africans, it affects everybody around the world, right? But we find that women tend to struggle the most when it comes to mental health challenges. Another thing that happens, especially in the African context, and again, as I make this statement, it may sound blanket, so I'm speaking in general terms. I'm not saying this is the case for every woman, but there are a lot of cultural practices that put women at a disadvantage. And when women tend to struggle with these things, it's hard to talk about because they've been normalized. So to answer your question, what I think about the mental state of women in general in Africa is that it's not in a good place. There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Okay, you did mention that women have a higher percentage when it comes to mental health. Why is that the case?
Have a higher percentage of mental health struggles?
Yeah.
I think this is the case, again, as I mentioned before, some of the practices, right? There's a lot of history of oppression and discrimination and situations that put women at a disadvantage. That's number one. The second two is that physiologically speaking, women tend to undergo a lot more emotional changes than men do in terms of what happens hormonally, like having a child, for instance, getting pregnant, having the child. After having the child, hormones fluctuate in a way that really affects a person's mental state and emotions. You have the reproductive cycle, where every time, you know, at some point in time during the month, there'll be uncontrollable fluctuation of hormones. So that, coupled with the way society works in general, where women generally have found themselves at a disadvantage, it only makes sense that more mental health issues would be seen in that regard.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But you've been practicing for the last 6 years. What sort of mental case health issues do people come and see you for?
Okay, it's a wide variety. At the top, I tend to see depression, anxiety, trauma. Trauma is actually a big one, and depression and anxiety are linked to trauma. So those three are the top. But then I do couples counseling, so relational issues are another big one. Sometimes when people are making career changes or unhappy in their jobs, they need to talk through it. That happens as well. But the most common ones are depression, anxiety, and trauma.
Okay, it's interesting you mentioned that. So what are the main causes of mental health issues in women in Africa?
Causes? Childhood trauma is a big one.
Could you elaborate?
So it ranges, there's a whole bunch. It ranges from physical abuse to sexual abuse to witnessing the abuse of other people. Sexual abuse I found tends to be the most common form of childhood trauma. From childhood
or adult life?
No, from childhood. It's actually alarmingly more common. We just don't talk about it.
Why don't people talk about it?
I guess, again, our culture
is it a woman coping with it? Or
no,
it's a cultural thing?
It's a cultural thing because you come into the world and you see how the world exists, right? And you have to fit into the way the world runs. So when a child comes in, whatever their experience is, whether or not it will be talked about won't be because the child doesn't want to talk about it, but what they've seen or what they've been told. So there's a lot of face saving and appearance presenting in our culture. Where you have to look good. Oh no, we don't talk about things like this, that type of thing, covering up of stuff. And that's the major reason why a lot of the times we don't talk about these things, because it's embarrassing. Women, it may be seen as though you're tainted, so you don't talk about it. Whoever the aggressor was or whoever the abuser was could be a family member or a prominent person, and hush hush, or monies are paid. So these are the reasons why oftentimes we don't talk about mental health issues.
Okay, so apart from sexual abuse, what other?
Physical abuse too is another one. Another form of childhood trauma that is very common in young women.
Okay.
And those are the two most common types that I have seen.
And that's very interesting, because I remember watching a documentary, and it was about the Rwanda genocide. And the child had, of course, the killings and stuff, and she happened to be relocated to Canada, and she was in school and she got depressed, and the school had wanted her to go in for counseling, but her family said no.
That's not unusual. It's not surprising at all. This could have been the case for a number of reasons. Number one, what are you going to say about us and your experience? Will this embarrass the family? Number two, religion is another. If we have problems, we'll pray about it. We'll figure it out as a family. Why do you need to go and talk to? Exactly. So, it's a shame.
So what are some of the symptoms of someone having a woman having a mental health issue?
Well, mental health issues, we also have to understand that just the way with physical health, you have a wide variety of health issues. So you can have a cold, you can have a headache, you can have diabetes or cancer. So it can range from something mild all the way to something extreme. And it's the same way with mental health. It can range from something mild, like I'm experiencing a stressful event, or all the way to clinical depression or schizophrenia. So in the same way, it would be difficult to say what the symptoms of physical health issues are, because there are a number of them. That's the same for mental health. It would depend on what the actual challenge is. Okay,
for our viewers who are watching and people who are not really medical, what's schizophrenia?
Come again?
What's schizophrenia?
Schizophrenia?
Yep.
Well, schizophrenia is a mental health disorder that has to do with, the word schizo means like a splitting, right? So it has to do with splitting between reality and I don't know, I should say unreality, or a splitting in reality, right? So you see symptoms such as delusions, where the person believes things that are not true, right, or that are not real. So sometimes people believe that there is a chip that has been implanted in their heads and someone is reading their thoughts, or paranoid schizophrenia. People struggling with paranoid schizophrenia believe that people are out to get them. So sometimes they'll believe that their family or friends or the government is plotting to do something to them. Hallucinations are common, where the person sees, feels, tastes, or smells things that are not there, right? And then this disorganized thought. So what can happen in a case like that would be the person is having a conversation with you, they start with a few words, and then the sentence ends in another thought, right? So that's what we call disorganized thinking.
Okay.
Right. Then there are other symptoms like catatonia, is when the person can like sit still or stand still in one position, rigid, without moving for a long period of time, and they're extremely still. It's not the way you are sitting talking to me, but it's almost as though they've turned into a statue.
Wow.
Right. These are some symptoms of schizophrenia, but it just has to do with a splitting of the person with reality.
Okay, that's interesting. So, I mean, people go through all this and all in a lifetime. What are some of the treatments available for people with such? With
mental health challenges?
Exactly.
Well, the very first is what I do, therapy. There is no mental health condition in which therapy is not useful.
Okay.
Right? Therapy is one. The next is medication.
Okay.
So in situations where the therapy alone hasn't worked, or the symptoms are so severe that the person is having difficulty functioning, medication is introduced. And this is something that I want to say that is very important for people to know, that if you are on any type of what we call psychotropic medication, because it's medication to do with psychological issues, it's extremely important to be in therapy alongside.
Okay.
So there are cases, often I'm seeing that people are on prescription medication for psychological issues but are not in therapy. The two of them, if they don't go hand in hand, medication cannot fix thought processes. Medication cannot fix choices that you make that support or feed into the challenge you're having. So once you're on medication, it's important to be in therapy as well. The goal is that in the event that what you're going through is something that you can taper your medication, so you don't have to be on it long term. You do that while you're in therapy.
Okay.
So that you have the tools to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, like without the medication as time goes on. Otherwise, you might end up remaining on it for the rest of your life.
Okay. I just want to clarify something. So what somebody with mental health issue and taking medication, what exactly, like you take antibiotics, it's supposed to kill the bacteria in your body and all that. What exactly is the medication meant to do?
Well, the medication is meant to balance chemicals in the brain and the body that are responsible for whatever symptoms you're experiencing. So that's what psychotropic medication is for.
Okay.
Let me give you an analogy. For instance, malaria is something that we're very familiar with in our society.
Okay.
Now, there's medication for malaria, right? So imagine if someone comes to you, you're a doctor, and they have malaria. You prescribe whatever it is, medication, you'll give to them for them to take so they'll be cured. Then they come back to you 2 months later. They have malaria again. Give them the medication, they're cured. This happens a third time. As a medical professional, you might start to ask, why does this keep happening?
Exactly.
Then you might ask things like, is there stagnant water around your house? Do you guys have mosquito nets? And these are behavioral things.
Okay.
So that's what therapy helps to address. When you take the medication that helps with the chemical balances, what things are happening at home, what things are happening with you that are encouraging this to happen? So depression, let's take depression for instance. If a person consistently makes unhealthy choices in their lives, maybe overspends or makes unhealthy choices in partners, they can take medication and then they develop depression. They can take medication to help with the depression. But so long as they keep choosing unhealthy partners or making unhealthy choices, right, the impact of this is going to cause their brain to release chemicals, right, that support depression.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because there are chemicals in our brains that are responsible for feeling good, healthy choices, our reward systems. They're called neurotransmitters.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Just to, you guys, if you're still on Just for Women Africa, do not forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a like and make a comment after the end of the show. Just, okay, while you are talking, just to make sure our viewers understand and the international viewers do. When you say therapy, could you elaborate? What exactly is involved in therapy?
Okay. So therapy has to do with talking to someone initially. It has to do with, so I've had people say, well, why should I pay to talk to someone when I have friends and family I can talk to for free? Yeah, it's a valid point. It's a valid point. The challenge with that is confidentiality, number one.
Okay.
Especially in our cultural context, where you share something with someone, and usually we go to like the older people or like our pastors or the elders, you know, to share our challenges with, and the next thing you hear, you've called a family meeting. Your aunties and uncles are there and they're airing out your business, right?
I know, right?
Or you get a phone call from an auntie, your mother told me that this happened, you know, and it's your privacy is violated without your permission. So because of that, there's a culture of silence. A lot of people will not share. But with therapy, your confidentiality is backed by law. So you often sign a confidentiality document, a document that says that your therapist will keep everything you tell them confidential. There are limits to that, like if you indicate that you are going to harm yourself or someone else, they are required to let the right people know so they can keep an eye on you and help you through that challenging time.
Okay.
Sometimes if a protected age group, so for instance a child or an adult, there's some indication of abuse of a child or an adult, and then other times to a crime. So it really depends on what the country's laws are around reporting. But generally speaking, intention to harm yourself or someone else are constant, you know. So otherwise, other than that, everything is confidential. So even if you decide to pay for therapy, let's say for your sister or for your partner, you don't have a right to the information that's discussed unless that person puts in writing. You have absolutely no right to it. Unless your sister is 18, she's below 18, and you are her legal guardian. So if it's a minor, parents can ask for information. But once she's an adult, even if you are paying for it, until she gives written permission, you cannot speak to the therapist about.
But if she's below 18, how do you certify that he or she is the guardian?
Documentation.
Documentation?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yes. So yes, so that's the first part of what therapy is. You're speaking to a trained professional, someone who has been trained to listen, someone who has been trained in different types of therapies, even with listening, right? It's a skill. Just hearing what a person says is not what listening is. As a professional, being trained to listen, the types of words the person uses, the way they express the words, the information that's given, all helps us figure out ways to be able to guide the person. So you're listening to a trained professional who keeps your information confidential, who doesn't judge, right? This is also very important because sometimes, again, in the religious setting, you speak to a counselor and they'll tell you the Bible says don't do that, you know, and you're already struggling with guilt. So it doesn't even encourage you to open up more. But a good licensed trained professional does not judge. And they see you as someone who's just trying to figure out how to navigate whatever it is you're going through. So that's another added advantage. And then you end up with tools that you can use to navigate for a lifetime. So with medication, you take it and it's supposed to just help you like in the short term. But if I teach you how to do breathing exercise that help to keep anxiety at bay, 10 years from now, if you're in an anxious situation, you can pick from that toolbox in your head and say, okay, I know breathing exercises work, so let me do some breathing. So you're provided with lifetime tools to navigate life's challenges.
That's interesting. Okay. Just the other day I was doing an interview with a woman and she passed a comment more of like saying that when she lost a baby and she was trying to say that a lot of women lose babies and they don't get over the loss of the child. How true is that?
I can believe that to be true. Losing someone you love is challenging, and also sometimes what that child represents for a woman.
Yeah.
We come from societies in Africa that heavily attach womanhood to childbearing.
Okay.
So if one of the major representations of being a woman is taken away from you, that can be painful, in addition to the fact that you've lost someone that you love. So that I can understand why it would be difficult for some women to work through and heal from the loss of a baby.
All right. I'm sure this is a question a lot of people want to know. I'm also curious to know. When a woman is pregnant and she has mental issues and she's depressed, or it gets really bad, as in they get onto the streets and all that, can it be passed on to the unborn child?
Yes, but not in the way we think. So, for instance, when a woman is pregnant, she's encouraged not to drink alcohol, smoke, take drugs, because the chemicals pass on directly. There is evidence, and it's been proven, that if you have a parent with a mental health disorder, the likelihood that their child will develop it is high. Unlike some other diseases where there's a direct passing on to the child, mental health issues are not only chemical in nature or genetic in nature. The environment supports it. So you can have a parent who has depression, and the child will go on to develop depression. But this happens because of the type of environment the child grows in, having a parent with depression.
Okay.
Right. So it's not set in stone that once the parent has it, they'll pass it on to the child.
No. Okay.
But the child can inherit the predisposition
to
developing it.
Okay. Do women, of course women are different from men, and, do women end up getting better after seeing a psychologist, or they just go into a coping mechanism waiting for the next trigger?
Okay. It's interesting, as we're having this conversation, I realize that a lot of the questions that you're asking, with the exception of childbirth, pertain to men as well, right? And it rings true for men. But because we're speaking to women, this is for women, right?
Yeah.
And even speaking to men, so they become educated on some of the challenges that women experience. Anyone can get better with psychological intervention. You don't have to sit and wait for the next trigger. It really depends on a number of factors, right? Depends on how intentional you've been about the work you're supposed to do. So your therapist can guide you, provide you with the tools, provide a safe space. But it's also very important for you to take what you've learned and gained from sessions and practice in the outside world. So if you're not putting that to practice in the outside world, then it might be one of those situations where you're just waiting for the next trigger. But long-term healing does happen. I'm testament to that myself. My program was such that you would go through therapy yourself, like with someone, to uncover some of the things that you struggle with as well. And that has taken me very far, in life. So it is possible to get better.
Okay, so what are some of the things like you recommend to, you could also mention one or two, to the women who come to you in Africa, and in ways to help with their mental health issues?
Oh yeah, the very first one is, it's so important to do work on self-acceptance and self-worth.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, absolutely. This is an area that's very passionate to me. A lot of the...
Because I've heard that statement before, acceptance of yourself. Can you just,
It's very difficult to be able to develop a secure sense of worth, a healthy sense of self-worth, because from childhood, when you come into this world, The value you have, you don't just get up and think I'm valuable. It's based on the feedback you get from society. You get from your mother, you get from your father, you get from school, you get from people around you.
Okay.
And again, remember I was saying that generally speaking, women have tended to be at a disadvantage when it comes to social issues, such that a woman in her 40s who's unmarried is like, hey, or 30s even, right? You know, your biological clock is ticking, A, B, C, D. And it's like the value or the symbol of womanhood is you should be able to have children. But a man in his 40s, it might be, okay, well, how come you haven't gotten married yet? But there isn't any stigma per se attached to it, as much as there is with women, right? And so many women grow up to tie their value to being desired by a man. Someone has to marry me. Once somebody has married me, someone has honored me, and have I been able to have children? So you can find the most accomplished woman academically, professionally, who still struggles with this idea of self, right? Who a lot of women tend to find themselves in relationships that are unhealthy because society has said what completes you, what seals the deal of your womanhood is being married and having children, no matter how unhappy you are.
That's interesting.
So why the self-work and the sense of self-worth is important, right? Is not to say that, oh, I don't need anybody, I don't need to marry, before anyone calls me a feminist. I am, but I'm also a realist. It's good to have a partner, right? But it's very important to have a secure sense of self so that whoever you decide to go into a long-term commitment with, you don't accept abusive treatment, right? Because I need to be able to fulfill that I've married and I've had children. Whoever you choose to be in a long-term relationship with, your choice has to be someone who comes in and also honors you, treats you with respect, treats you with kindness, right? But in our society, we don't see much of that happening because it's like, okay, someone has married you, you know, at least you've been married, at least you're married. People are looking for a husband. You know what I mean? As a reason for people to continue to be on the receiving end of poor treatment.
But in terms of self-worth, do women really actually get there?
Sorry?
In sense of self-worth, do women actually get there?
Oh, I'm a woman and I'm there. So yeah, and I know some other women too who have. Not to say that you'll never get to a point or you'll never have circumstances where you still question your worth, right? But for the most part, it's secure. You understand that I will not lower my standards of how I should be treated just so that society can say I'm also a woman now.
But that's extremely hard in today's society.
It's difficult. That's why I use the word work.
Almost impossible.
Well, it's not as almost impossible. I think it was closer to impossible in our parents' time. It's becoming easier now.
Really, is it?
Yes, relatively compared to back then. It's becoming easier now.
Because I had friends who got married and go like, you know, you don't get, there's that respect that you don't just give you until you get married.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, people will give you that respect, I guess, and that's why it's hard work, right? But are you living to get the respect of others? That's why I said self-worth, work. It's work. You don't just wake up one day and decide that, you know what, I'm deciding I'm going to have a secure sense of self-worth, right? Yeah. It's work on a daily basis. Sometimes it requires you accepting rejection.
Okay.
Accepting people saying, or men, for instance, in the context of romantic relationships, since that's what we're doing, men saying, you're this, you're that, you know, do you get it? Have been rejected by a number of people. Because it's not easy. You're right. People treat you, in some places you're treated differently once you're a Mrs. Then you become the Mrs. and when will you have children? Right? Yeah. It's almost a never-ending thing. But when you have done the work and you can be secure in yourself, you can go through challenging situations. You can still want to be in a relationship or with a partner, but again, you will not lower your standard of how you should be treated as a person just to have the title Mrs. or mother of. Exactly.
Right. Okay, let's go back to mental health. I mean, people come in for treatments and all. How long does it take for someone to get better?
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody takes antibiotics, I know that within a week or two, I should be fine. The malaria drugs is within 3-4 days. When it comes to mental health in women,
it's the same thing with the medication, right? There's time periods attached to different types of medication where they'll say that you should start to see improvement in your symptoms in this number of days or weeks or months, right? Okay. But when it comes to therapy, that really varies. I get that question a lot. People will call me, okay, so how many sessions will I need, type of thing. I usually recommend that people commit to 4 sessions initially, just to get a sense of what therapy is like, to talk through some key issues and see how the therapeutic relationship is. Because a key component of how you improve has to do with the relationship you have with your therapist. Not everybody is for everyone. It doesn't mean just because a person is a therapist,
it does go in.
No.
Okay, I never knew that.
Just therapists have different approaches, different ways they handle situations, right? So for some people, this is not a good fit. That's the term that we use. We're not a good fit for each other, and that's key. You should be able to feel comfortable with the person that you're working with, and if you don't, it's important to find another therapist that you can be comfortable with. So with regards to time frame of how long it will take for you to get better, it's based on the therapeutic relationship. It's based on how intentional you are about doing the work outside of therapy. Because that's actually the most difficult part. Coming to therapy is easy. Once you start, it's easy. When you're in session, it's easy because it's just you and the therapist. Now, when you step out into the real world, the real dysfunctional world that we all live in, right? That we all live in, how do you take information, things you've learned in a controlled environment, and start to practice it in an environment where there's so many things you don't have control over? And for me, one thing that I've seen is with the clients who make progress the fastest are those who are willing to do the hard work outside of therapy.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we're about rounding up. You guys are watching Just Women in Africa. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, and leave a comment at the end of the show. My name is Olaleke, and we're with
Petrina Adusei.
Okay, she's a trained psychologist. Okay, as we round up the show, there are 2 questions actually. In pertaining to mental health, what advice can you give to women out there?
I want to say that the stigma about mental health, about suffering in silence, I say this almost everywhere I go. Unless someone can prove me wrong, I don't know about any award ceremony there is in this world where they say the reward for the woman who suffered the most in silence, who endured the most abuse and hardship, goes to. So we're not working towards any award to suffer in silence. Asking for help doesn't make a person weak. Wise people, the greatest, the most successful people know when to ask for help. Let's end the stigma of mental health, not just by posting and watching videos about it, but being comfortable sharing our stories. I share my challenges with my clients from time to time. I share my challenges on social media because I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed to say that I've been to therapy before. I'm not ashamed to say I have struggled with mental health issues. I struggled with thoughts of suicide before. I'm not ashamed. If more of us told our stories, we'll realize that these challenges are more common than they are like, oh, can you believe this, moments. So please reach out for help. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you, nothing different with you. A lot of us have had struggles. A lot of us have been able to find help, by seeking mental health services. That's the first thing that I'll say. And the second thing I'll say is it's so important to learn to work on your self-worth and self-acceptance and to build it on things that are not external. Things like relationship status, things like how much money I have, how long my hair is, what job I have, right? Because you'll always find a situation that you are in that somebody has a better version of that thing than you. But when you develop a secure sense of self and you start to treat yourself with love and respect, you set the standard for how anyone who comes into your life, friend, co-worker, romantic relationship, you set the standard for how other people should treat you because of the way you treat yourself first. a lot of the times we sit down and we don't understand why someone would break our hearts, why someone would gossip about us or lie about us or treat us the way they do. But the first question is, how are you treating yourself? What are the choices you're making? What are the situations that you keep putting yourself in? Who are the types of people that you find yourself attracted to? Friendship, romantic or otherwise, because this says a lot about what we think and feel about ourselves, right? So again, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's very important. And then also learn to build a secure sense of self and acceptance.
Okay, that's nice. Last question. All right. Another advice out there, but not in terms of mental health, just in terms of to generate women out there in Africa, because women out there say men do not give them the opportunities in life. It's got to climb up the ladder. Men exploit them sexually. What advice can you give out to women out there?
It's true. We live in a world that can be very unfair. The change that we want to see, there's a saying, I don't remember exactly, it says be the change that you want to see out there. And that's one thing that I have found that has worked for me. When you look at all the cards that are stacked up against us, it can be very daunting. It can feel like, I can't change systems that are already in place. But when you start with yourself first, and then you start with the environment immediately around you, you start to change your worldly experience. Again, it is tough out there. I'm not just saying these things as though you can just get up and do, but start with you. Once you start making changes to how you think about yourself, how you see yourself, the choices that you make, it will naturally translate to your outside world. It will translate to how you negotiate for yourself. And what you negotiate for, you either get or you don't, but it sets the standard for how you should be treated. When you start to value yourself, the standard you set is, I am of value, so you have to treat me that way. It's gradual, it takes time. Sometimes we want the very fast results. We want the people around us to change just like that. But until we do, it's going to be very difficult for those around us to change, right?
Yeah.
So be the change that you want to see. Start with you first. Be mindful. The things that you say about people and their mental health status, educate yourself, read a lot. These days, there's so much on social media that is posted that's healthy towards mental health. It's not only about Googling celebrities and how many children they have or who they're cheating on who with and stuff like that. But if you Google things like how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with depression, you'll find so many helpful tools. If you go on social media, you can follow pages for therapists. There's so many podcasts about mental health. There's so much information out there, more than we think there is these days. Make use of these things, right? And take a step in the right direction for your mental health.
Oh, thank you, Petrina.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm sure that people who will be watching, who want to get in touch with you, who want to come in and book an appointment with you, can you just tell the viewers out there how they can get in touch with you?
Okay. So you can get in touch with me via my Instagram page. As Lekon and I were laughing about, I do respond to DMs. Not within 5 minutes, but I do respond to DMs. If you go on my Instagram page, which is Petrina AK, so that's Petrina AK or MBS Care, I have a link there that will send you either to my website, my podcast, or my other social media pages. So yes, that's how you can get in touch with me.
Okay. That's good. Okay, the year has come to an end. Do you want to say Merry Christmas or Happy New Year to all your clients out there?
Oh yes, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and as I always say, I wish you peace and unconditional love.
All right. Thank you, Petrina. Thanks for coming to the show.
Mom.
Okay, guys, watching Just Women in Africa, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment on the end of the show, and I'll be leaving Petrina's details at the end of the show. You can get in touch with her. And this is not going to be the last thing you're going to be seeing here. There are many more shows will come in. So hook on to Just Women in Africa on YouTube, and we'll see you on the next show. Till next time, it is Happy New Year. Bye. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.